Welcome to the Simple Minds podcast, where we look to empower and encourage real conversation amongst men everywhere by unpacking topics on self-growth, philosophy, and business. My name's Jacob, I'm hosting today's episode, and before I get into the topic, the drink I've brought today is a little different to what we usually feature. It's usually some form of alcohol, but today I've brought a smoothie. It's called the Muscle Milk Smoothie. Oh. It's got a little bit of protein, a bit of acai. It's from our kind of friends in Leederville, Acai Brothers, who are looking.
Did you put these on my points?
Did I? I did not.
We have a collective loyalty program card here. We use Justin's name
nice.
rather than individually.
Yeah, well, that's fair. No, I was not aware of that.
Next time. So what is in this smoothie, Jacob?
Oh, specifically, the Muscle Milk Smoothie has acai, banana, coconut milk, cacao protein, shredded coconut, cashews, some more cacao, dates, and maca.
Do you cheers smoothies, or do you just sort of...
Oh, cheers.
Clink.
Cheers, lads.
Like plastic, couple glasses.
Nice.
And the reason I chose the Muscle Milk smoothie today is because my topic is on toughness, specifically kind of physical toughness in men and the place it has in, I guess, modern society and I guess modern masculinity as well. Historically, and for as far as human beings can be traced back, men have had roles where physicality has been a huge aspect of their success and growth as individuals. Leaders in the ancient world, men that fought wars, who, like Marcus Aurelius, for example, were leaders as physically tough men who people kind of didn't want to mess with. And even as far back as World War II and some of the great wars, that men were treasured and chosen for their physical ability to fight wars, to be tough, to lead from that perspective. Whereas in 2019, most men will go through life having no reason to be physically tough, that they're unlikely to go to war, they're unlikely, if they're fortunate, to come across attackers or to be attacked physically, and therefore there's essentially no current requirement or need to be physically tough. However, I guess it still has a place, and that's what I'm trying to discover a little bit. There's still college quarterbacks who are the big physical types that lead their team. There are tall, domineering politicians that use their physical presence to attract power and kind of assert their position. So there's still, to a degree, a place for physicality and toughness, but less so, and that's something I kind of want to discuss first. So the first thing I want to do is, to what degree does physical toughness relate to masculinity, and how does it impact our sort of performance and success? Have you guys had experiences yourself where being physically tough has been advantageous or improved any situation for you, or is it something that's not required nowadays?
I think the only time for me is that scenario in the kitchen where nobody can open the jar, but I wander in, I grab that jar and I open it.
Or you can't open it.
I open it every time.
He puts a knife in the top and then he opens it.
Yeah, has that actually ever happened for you?
Yeah, and I feel good for the day, man. Once I go in and dominate that jar, my masculinity has been ticked.
You give a grandma one of those rubber pads, mate, and she'll be as tough as you.
Exactly.
Like, it's a science thing, not a toughness thing.
So, jokes aside, but that was, there's a little form of masculinity in that. Maybe
masculinity. Yeah. Perhaps Trav's been in a supermarket and a lovely young lady has said, "Oh, hey, can you reach the cereal on the top shelf?" And he's like, "Yeah, I'm a big tall man, I'll get that for you."
I'll tell her, hell no, get that step over there and get it yourself. Equality, I'm not here just for your...
That's tough.
That's tough, yeah.
Absolutely no. I'm a true gentleman. I'd be up there like something.
Like a tall person.
Like a monkey up a tree.
But novelty aside, has anyone ever been disadvantaged by not being physical?
From a basis of physical health stimulates your body, I'm in that space at the moment. I mean, I haven't been taking care of myself physically for a few years, and over the last 2 years I've started taking more attention to nutrition and physical exercise for a platform of more mental stability.
Self-esteem even.
No.
No?
I mean,
No, I mean that. I mean,
Not for Conrad.
No, for me,
of
it's
course
just a discipline thing, and it comes down to the fact that if you look at the people that are performing at the peak of their games, whether it be the athletes that are winning or whether it be the business people that are achieving, they have an element of physical training and physical stimulus in their daily routines. So you need 30 minutes at least of high intensity exercise or average intensity exercise to maintain some sort of metabolic function. That's what I do it for.
But if you're asking like if toughness has a place in 2019, physical toughness, I feel like there doesn't. When you reference it to that kind of element, I can't remember when I've needed to be tough and it's hindered my life and whatnot. But physicality, definitely, like for health, is completely different in my point of view. But when it comes to being like raw and tough, like the only areas, like coming back a few episodes ago, was about self-esteem. I used to be really skinny, so like I'm 6'1" and I used to weigh 65 kilos, which was essentially stick and bone.
When you got out of a pool.
Sorry. Yeah.
Dripping wet.
And so now I'm like 90 kilos, and I kind of always wanted to be bigger because I felt like that would give me more presence and people, again, which is the self-esteem and fear of other people's opinions. And so, and then I started going to the gym and I felt better about myself and my appearance. And at the end of the day, you could say, look, at the end of I think that's important to feel good about yourself. So, and then you do get challenged by the big guys when you go to the gym, and who are like the tough. They come across as like tough, and that can be challenging hurdle to over because that's intimidating.
Yeah.
But like from a needing to be tough physically, I don't think is a necessity. Mentally being tough is a completely different story.
Well, exactly. I value mental toughness over physical toughness way more.
Yeah,
because I can achieve a lot more with my mind than I can with my biceps, I guess.
Says the true skinny bloke.
But do you think that?
But there you go. At least I live my values.
But do you think there's been the quashing of, or the lack of needing to be physical in day-to-day life? Do you think that energy and that sort of depth of evolution has to come out somewhere? Do you think it will pop up somewhere else? That need to be more powerful or whatever it is. Do you think that's
I guess
at play?
Because a lot of especially older generations tend to call millennials or Gen Y soft. They say, you guys haven't had it tough. You guys, and I know that refers more to resilience and grit and sort of mental toughness, but to a degree, you get a lot of mental resilience and toughness from having physical challenges as well. We haven't had to fight wars and things. And I guess to what degree will that come out in another way? Sometimes you see people overcompensate for it, like the stereotypical like little man syndrome. People who are not physically tall or people that are skinny, I guess, will act out in other ways to try and dominate or to be physical or to be masculine in another way. And sometimes that can be...
if it's not controlled, it can be quite dangerous, I suppose.
Yeah, and it's not productive or it's not useful in that way. And like the big underlying question here is, to what degree is physical toughness still a important part of masculinity? And can you be a content masculine man and not be physically tough like a lumberjack or like a soldier, etc.?
Or a Goggins.
Yeah.
I think so. I think physically tough.
But even to be physically tough, it takes a mentally tough person to become physically tough.
Yeah.
Right?
What do you mean by physically tough?
Well, yeah, exactly right. But physically,
Drag yourself through like rocks and blah 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 blah. Like
that's mental toughness.
Going,
right?
Yeah, that's meant. But you have to have the capacity to jump that wall, right?
Running on asphalt and barefoot.
Toughness.
I can't do that.
No, neither can I.
Yeah. Well,
Like,
Get
but
soft
it's possible. Yeah, I've got fucking office hands and office feet.
These soft, moisturised hands.
Yeah, that's right.
But I think people always
That's
there's
physical
a need for it,
toughness.
right? Because we always will seek out leadership and strength, and that's not, I think it's Malcolm Gladwell, Outliers, and he talks about one of the many examples is that the average height of like US presidents, for example, and certain leaders have always been 6 foot plus and
6'2".
6'2", so that whether they've been, they've always had a commanding presence. I think the thing about being physically tough is not necessarily using it all the time. I think that's a sign of physical or mental weakness to go with it. But I think you have to have a mental toughness and bring a presence. You've seen guys that aren't necessarily that big and strong have that big presence. I think it's a different. I don't know that you can split mental and physical completely, and then it depends what you mean by physical toughness, because we still need an element of it. I think if we're going to be the protector and of our children and take that role, well, I know when
It's
if something's happening in the
emotional
backyard
toughness.
and a piece of furniture or a swing falls on some kid, I'm probably going to get there first and be the one doing that and sort of exercising whatever the maximum of my strength is to help a situation like that. And I've been in situations many times where it's clearly me who has to be the one that uses the most physical capabilities that I have to help out a situation in need, for example.
Yeah. Well, so physical strength is probably a good thing to strive towards then. It's not a bad thing to strive towards, because it will help you out in life through, as you said, anything that could be happening that does require you to act in a physical manner. It's going to be much better if you're at your peak performance or strength.
Yeah.
What is it like? This is your topic, Jacob. So
Yeah.
what is it that you feel like is lacking, or that you feel like you need more clarity on?
It's not necessarily come from a place where I want to find clarity as much as I just wanted to open a discussion about the role of physical toughness and strength. Does it still have a place in modern masculinity? The other aspect is that we still, as a society, place a huge value on people with physical strength and toughness, whether it be athletes, whether it be role models like myself, like Jocko or David Goggins, for example. They're people that I look up to because I see them as achieving extraordinary physical feats. People who are rock climbers, world record holders, strong men, all these people are idolized, and especially men, for their physical displays of strength and toughness and
So when you say toughness, a lot of that is sort of resilience to pain, I suppose. What you can push yourself through. And David Goggins talks about that all of us only operate at that 40%, where we can easily go past that pain tolerance of, if you're at the gym, you can there's always that little bit extra in there. So how much of us can we develop that more, which will help us in life to get through stuff?
Yeah.
I would have thought.
Do you feel there's a lack of toughness then, or perseverance or grit in, like, I mean, you own a gym, and a lot of people that come through, is this a trait that you feel that is lacking?
To a degree, yes. I think a lot of people these days, like, I guess in general, if you look at, the world, like Great War eras versus today, the general level of physical toughness and conditioning is lower. Overall, people nowadays, men and women, are more overweight than they were several years ago. Their physical ability for the average person to do certain things is starting to decline. Granted, at the extremes, the physical performances are improving, but I think the average is declining. For me in the gym, I do see a lot of people. We tend to attract people who are sick of the traditional gym and therefore looking for something different. Sometimes I find that people have not tried hard enough, or have gone, oh, that's hard work, I'm going to look for something easier, and quickly we filter them out because they're lacking the ability just to work hard.
Isn't that still just mental? Because it's a choice to work out, right?
Yeah. I don't think in terms of physical strength is different to toughness, in that toughness requires a huge amount of sort of mental energy.
But it all comes down to that, like, goal and purpose as well. Like, I mean, how many times have you laid under a barbell and just not brought your A game because your head and you just weren't in it, whereas if you were. So for example, I talked about that situation where, let's say I needed to use my physical toughness. Well, like, there's been stories of mothers lifting cars up because their baby was underneath it, and like, if there's a purpose and a reason, we can bring incredible toughness. If we've committed to achieving an endurance race, there's a grit that will come with it because of the months of training and everything else. Like, whereas you say people aren't generally like showing that physical toughness because they don't need to. We're not in a position where we need that as a general rule across the board. In our day-to-day activities, because we don't need to do those things just to live our lives. We only need to in the fringes and the extremes.
Yeah, and an interesting stat, and they're doing research on it at the moment, is that the longer term a endurance event is, the more likely women are to start bridging the kind of gap between male and female. Some of the data is inconclusive. Some studies show, and like experiences show, that it is and isn't. But something like an ultra marathon, for example, they run 100 miles, 160 Ks, for example. It is no longer necessarily a huge strength requirement as much as just your ability to grit and kind of be tough, and kind of, you need to be more mentally tough than physically tough or something like that. And therefore there's a perception that women tend to be the tougher species, the tougher gender, and that's a question I'll get to next.
But if you look at nature, that's not wrong.
Yeah,
they guard their kids in the household,
and they give birth
with ferocity. I mean, even what the black widow spider eats the male. If that's the one, if one of those spiders do.
Yeah, look at our man flus.
The man flu.
Yeah, and that's funny because that's something that I've always heard, is that women are the stronger sex, but it's not something I've necessarily experienced myself, and that's why I've always looked.
Stronger sense in what definition?
Yeah, that's more
stronger.
But pain tolerance.
Pain tolerance, ability to and like, you talk about man flu, and it's something that I've never personally experienced myself. I just sort of,
I'm sure you haven't,
kind of toughen on and kind of move on. Like, and I'm only talking very micro. Like, my wife and I, as two examples of this, my tolerance for pain is much higher. My tolerance for discomfort is a lot higher, and my ability to endure physically is a lot higher. However, that's only a very, very small subset. So
that's because you allow it to be. Now, when you want to throw the topic of childbirth in there, the purpose drives the outcome, right? So the why they're going through that, why they go is much more prevalent than why they wouldn't, and therefore they'll endure the pain that goes along with that.
You don't have much choice.
Well, they do have a choice. They have a choice of not to get pregnant.
Oh yeah, but it's much too late once you give birth.
So they've accepted the uncomfortableness of carrying for 9 months and the pain that they're going to have to go through. Yes, they'll use some pain blockers where they can, and some people don't. But historically, will tell you that any woman that allows herself to become pregnant knows that she's going to have a very, very interesting next 9 months.
Yeah.
But
in my relationship, like, my wife is way more tough than I am. The amount of pain she has to put up with, like,
that's just listening to you in the morning.
Yeah, dealing with me. Yeah.
Does my hair look good?
Yeah.
Where's the moisturizer, dear?
That's right. For my office hands, my nice moist hands.
That word.
Moist.
Lush.
But it's like, definitely more tough. Same with the man flu. But I think the thing here is that, look, I feel like it's an area I would like to improve on, is the mental toughness, and I think it comes back to what we talked about last couple of weeks, which is,
are you prepared to give birth to a baby? That's the metaphor that I'm using.
That's,
if we had to,
that's the extreme.
But if you say you want to become mentally tough,
I reckon this thick shake might be doing the job right now.
From a grit and perseverance point of view, because a lot of people just give up. It's a conversation of willpower. Like, it's kind of like that meme where there's the guy who's tunneling through, and then like all he needs is one more hit, and then the gold's behind the one more hit. To achieve anything, it is genuinely perseverance and sticking at something long enough. And I don't think that trait is common enough in Western society, given a lot of the culture and internet and blah 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 of where we're at. The sense of entitlement overrides perseverance and grit, and talent can fuck you. And like Angela,
I swear, mate, that's my forum.
Angela Lee Duckworth has got a good book called Grit, a whole book on
I've just
grit.
listened to it. That's where the concept came from.
And she said actually the correlation, the more talented you are, actually ends up being the less grittier you are.
Yeah, that's where Durant talks about talent and hard
You
work.
don't have to work for
You
it.
rely on your talent too much as opposed to doing the work for it.
And so, and the funny thing is like she acknowledged there's not very much science around it, and really understanding what creates grit.
Hats off to Jacob for working his quarterback analogy and NFL prowess into that too. But I challenge the fact that you used a quarterback to define physical toughness, mate, because I reckon they're some of the weakest people on the football field. Mental toughness, from a leadership perspective, I get it. Physical toughness, you can't go past that defensive line, man. They're beasts.
Oh, of course, yeah. But I think people they look at the quarterback as the leader, and they're not necessarily the biggest guy out there, but physical and mental toughness tied in together is they have to focus on their job while everyone's trying to hit them from every angle. So, and often they'll take a hit after making a pass, for example. So, everyone kind of...
Sorry to interrupt. I was watching, going back to the masculinity piece, I was watching a video last night about, I think your question is, do we confuse masculinity with toughness? And like there's this thing of like males within groups of like it's cool to not let things affect you and like essentially be stoic around like I'm too cool to care about that thing, or try to be the tough guy, which actually comes back to root issues.
But that's not stoicism, is it?
No, not stoic in the philosophy sense.
That's it's ignorance, it's arrogance.
But that's a very common thing in males, right? Like if you go to a construction site or like where there's very dominant like that, people don't like. There's that tough. Like I think that's what you're trying, like where you're going with it, right? Is like the masculinity piece. Do we have to be that way to be masculine?
It becomes a facade. You've got the big guy at the gym who's been working out size of Arnold Schwarzenegger, but then takes his shoes off and walks outside and cries because the ground's hot or whatever. It's like
Exactly like that too, right?
Well, no, but in short, like, yes, toughness can hinder what you're exactly saying about masculinity. Because if you, like you were saying, Justin, if you're not going to talk about something and you want to be tough around your mates.
It's facade, though. We talked about that. That's what it looks like, though. You might be Brutus Beefcake, but behind that, if you're not functionally and emotionally strong or intelligent, your EQ doesn't add up, and it doesn't matter how physically tough.
Because I think guys are led to believe that like showing emotion is weakness. As well.
And it's a huge problem.
Like we're led to believe, like you look at all the...
Don't cry, you sook.
Yeah, hero stories and like...
Boys don't cry.
Yeah, all of that. Like...
toughen up, princess.
Exactly.
All that language that is still around today.
Oh, yeah.
Has an impact.
And I think... And again, this is where it becomes more the EQ than the IQ type stuff. It's knowing that how that phrase serves and disserves you, and using the choosing to allow it to serve you as opposed to disserve you. Now, I'm very mindful. I grow up I'm around a lot of men, and I will say some of those phrases, some of those terms. And most of the time, I take it for granted that people know where I'm coming from. I find myself more often than not with the current generation coming through that where I say a flippant statement like that, I will go back and survey the person or the crowd that I've spoken to, and offer, obviously some level of comfort that I understand it's not meant to be taken personally, because it is just a flippant statement, but how you choose to receive that is more important.
Yeah, what mentality you take, the victim mentality or other.
And it's a big aspect in the defence world is that, and that's something I care quite a bit about. Like, granted, I only had a small exposure as an Army reservist for 4 years, but it's something I read a lot about. The people I look up to are typically former soldiers because it's something I idolise myself. But I hear a lot of stories about men having to go off to war and coming back very different. They've seen things, they've been forced to do things to overcome the enemy that they aren't necessarily particularly proud of. But then when they come back, they don't talk about it. They don't express their feelings. And the rate of PTSD and suicide among soldiers who have returned from war is much higher than it should be, because they're especially, the culture in the army is toughen up, don't talk about it, be bigger.
But is it higher than it should be? Like,
it is exactly what it needs to be.
It is what it is based on the experiences they've had, I think, in a lot of ways. I mean, I'm not saying it's a good thing.
No, we don't have to accept it.
But it's not, but is it higher than it? Yeah, it is what it is, like you say.
I think I personally believe it's higher than it should be, because there aren't...
What should it be?
It's obviously never going to be zero, because they've experienced things that will potentially put them at harm.
But can you see how you're referencing it's higher to what it should be almost defeats you in accepting what it is to then change to where it needs to go to, whatever that new balance is?
Yeah, of course.
They're obviously not receiving the help that they need. Obviously, the structure's not in place.
But the first part is that the help's there. We know the help is there.
But it's obviously not working.
They're not
perfectly.
encouraged, or they're not courageous enough.
Yeah.
You know, and that's true courage, is to open up to your vulnerabilities and ask for help, or allow
But
people to help you.
that's the sort of vicious circle of it, is that they bottle it up and can't do that. So where does that release come from?
So again, it's not physical strength we're talking about here, right? It's that innate mental strength that, okay, well, fine, I'm going to open myself up to being judged.
Yep.
I'm going to ask for help, and I'm going to be the figurehead of that. You know, I remember Magic Johnson did that when he came out and had HIV and then retired from basketball. You know, at a time where HIV was prevalent in the world, and he allowed himself to be the figurehead of that, and become the voice of change behind that. And he transitioned out of pro sports into everything else in his life.
What do you think within him helped him do that then? Because obviously, I think a lot of people probably struggle to get to that point. So what do you think within him?
He had to accept. So firstly, he had to accept, and I've watched a lot of stuff on this, the fact that, okay, how he contracted HIV was going to be an area of contention, because usually it was attached to homosexual activity. For him, it was promiscuity, and so then that attacked his household and his family, and so he had to be okay with that, courageous with that, to allow him to be the best person he can be, to deal with whatever else came with that. Now he's still functioning; he's a fully functioning human and adult right now. He hasn't died of AIDS and hasn't deteriorated his life, but a lot of it would come about from his attitude towards and courage in dealing with it. So how do you turn something that's a perceived negative into a positive? You accept it first, and you play the cards that you're dealt.
Would you say that that's actually the definition of tough in a positive way?
100%, yeah. Well, because it's opening yourself up for judgment, right? You're not hiding.
So is that the toughness we should really be celebrating?
That's accepting vulnerability, yeah.
And that's the problem I have with modern society to a degree, is we idolize athletes for their physical prowess. We send soldiers off to war saying, well done them for being strong and courageous. But when they come back and they're needing our help and they need to be vulnerable, we go, oh no, we're not going to celebrate that. Or when a sportsman comes out as gay or as struggling with something, we go, that doesn't get celebrated nearly as much as the physical aspect.
It doesn't add up to the picture you've got,
and
of
therefore
what that person should
our
be.
sons and daughters and the next generation are getting a perception that being physical is something that should be celebrated, being as a male, being vulnerable is something that shouldn't yet be celebrated. And I guess that's what I'm trying to, come to terms with. I've got a son myself, potentially have another son or daughter in 3 months as well. But a different direction I'll take it in briefly is, how do we cultivate more mental toughness by going through physical challenges? Some people have cold showers, some people run ultra distance marathons, some lift weights and do CrossFit and tough workouts.
Aren't they just outcomes though of a decision? If that's, again, lead and lag measures, right? You know, what are we focused on? Are we focused on the lag, or are we focused on the lead?
The challenge, like the cold shower, for example, the challenge is the step in. It's the decision. It's not actually the physical
action or the outcome.
Yeah, once you're in it, you're in it. And
you've got the choice to step right out again, though. You have to endure.
No, but I don't think anyone struggles with that. I think they struggle with the step in.
But that's the lag, right? The lead is, deciding to have a cold shower and step into it. That's the lead measure. I'm going to do this.
Yeah, but that's something you need to do it on a daily basis to strengthen that. And so, like doing
you're
an
not
ultra,
strengthening the lag, you're strengthening the
Your
lead.
lead, you're strengthening your lead.
But
which
with
is what
lead,
mental
lag,
toughness
whatever,
is.
Jacob's talking about the act of getting into a habit and testing yourself and doing it over and over again until you get to that spot where lead, lag, whatever it is, you're doing it. So it's a
Like if you wanted to
mental
improve your
game.
mental toughness, which is a decision, go run on asphalt. Like will improve your mental toughness to persevere through something that's painful. It's doable. It's not actually. You might get sores and stuff, but I could see how doing something that not abstract, but physically can. It sounds like it's full circle. One leads to the other, and they feed off each other.
Yeah, but
Yeah,
so no, like
100%.
if you have a fear of public speaking and you go and run on the asphalt every day for 7 years, it's not going to change.
What that might cultivate you the courage to make the decision to go into the uncomfortable, because you're just stepping into the uncomfortableness, right?
It's a muscle.
And it's a muscle. Like, so I don't know. I'd argue that could help you pull the decision to do that because you are more comfortable with making tough decisions and going head on into uncomfort.
Now, what was the last time you did something really uncomfortable, Matt? Like
Physically.
really uncomfortable, physically uncomfortable.
Physically? Oh, wow. Physically uncomfortable.
Training with Dale last year.
Yeah, no, it's not uncomfortable. The training doesn't do that to me.
What about when you went for your first run? Remember, was it last year? You did that big run just out of nowhere after not running for ages. Was that physically demanding and mentally you got over that?
It was physically demanding, but I've still got a lot of history doing those.
You don't need to be tough, man.
It's harder to go through a mental uncomfortable thing rather than a physical for
I don't
me
know,
anyway.
It gets to a point where can you take that physical to
Yeah,
the
I
next
could-
level, which then the mental helps, and then it's sort of
So I could have kept running for further
course.
before my body
you went
was
to
like,
David
no,
Goggins level.
It's screaming at me at the moment. Yeah, and I was at the point where I could have kept running, but I knew that, look, I'm already going to be quite sore where I'm at. I could clearly keep going, but without the training, I knew I was just going to do some silly damage that was unnecessary.
Yeah.
I'd already gone and run triple the distance that I'd run in a long time, and that was fine. That was good. More so, I probably do it on a sort of mental basis. Done some big things like run large scale event last year just with no experience, and that was pushing me outside the comfort zone. But you very quickly get comfortable with anything and everything, and I think that's the challenge. To build the toughness, you have to build. Or you can use habits, but you also
It has to be. It's disciplined, right?
So you've got the discipline side, but then you've also got if you're wanting to push yourself, you're going to have to keep finding new ways all the time to do that. You can't just do something big, and then once you do it 10, 12 times, you sort of got comfortable there. Like you're always getting to a more comfortable state, I think.
Which is exactly what you want. You want to get to that uncomfort. It's feeling more comfortable, so you're forgetting about that, and you've now moved up a level.
PBs.
But then-
You're
but
moving
then
up
you
another
keep
level,
going.
right?
Yeah.
So coming back to how can you cultivate toughness in your daily routine? The other thing we've talked about in the past is tackling the biggest topic or the biggest task. What is the biggest thing? What is the biggest question you ask yourself today, and who do you need to ask another big question of? So not only you becoming better, you're allowing your team around you to become better. Now I work with that regularly. What's the biggest thing I need to ask, as opposed to getting to the end of the day and not asking the question at the end of the week, the end of the month.
Yeah. That can be scary, can't it? That big thing that's hanging over you. The longer you leave it, the bigger it gets. And
But the
scarier
flip
it gets.
side, or the reciprocity on that, is then invites others to ask big questions of you.
Yeah. Knock-on effect. Yeah.
I have a question for Trav. Is that in your youth you were an elite level athlete, and even now you're a high level basketballer as well. To what degree do the challenges of training and pushing yourself out of your comfort zone physically when you were young in pole vaulting, how has that impacted your mental resilience today?
I think breeding it into myself as a child.
Did you use too big a words for you?
Cultivate? What's that? I think breeding it into me as a child or a teenager certainly helped me as I got older. It helped me that, you know, I did what I loved, and I'm not sure why, but I just love the grit and the hard work of anything that I do.
Yeah.
It's just embedded in me from a young age. So to answer your question,
It's a chicken and egg kind of thing.
Yeah.
Like, did you get to the physical level you got to because you were mentally tough, or did you breed mental toughness because of the physicality? Or it's very much a
they work
hybrid.
in tandem.
Yeah.
So they
work in
feed
tan-
each other in a cycle.
I think it depends on vision and purpose, which
Yeah.
you know, all that's bullshit. But if you want it bad enough, you'll push through the physical, which then
But
byproduct.
you've got to make the
they
decision
feed,
to go after it.
They feed each other.
yeah.
So if you go after a PB in the pole vault, for argument's sake, there's a number of other measures you've got to get done to get that PB, right?
Absolutely.
So the decision to go after the PB then leads to another volume of other smaller decisions.
And I guess it's perseverance. How bad do you want it, which will push you through the pain and the suffering.
Yeah.
If you want it bad enough, you'll keep going.
Give birth to that baby, man.
That's a topic for another day.
But does that make you physically tough, like being able to fling yourself over a pole?
I guess it does.
It does in a way, right?
Yeah.
You know what I mean? But what I'm saying is, it's specific.
Yeah.
It's specific.
Yeah.
So like you're targeting, and that's one level of, you can build yourself as a credible athlete in that space, and then. But if you're talking about that toughness, like, how does it transpire, or how do you move that to other aspects of your life? And I mean, I think you can move some of the mental toughness there, but the physical toughness doesn't mean you're at ground zero if you were to switch sports. But you've got to redo that, and I think that's where you've got to continually put yourself into discomfort, like in uncomfortable situations, to continue to grow.
Yeah, and there's often, I've heard stories, and I've known people who are particularly big, I say, sports stars in high school, and they had a lot of self-esteem built around the fact that they were the jock, they were the sports star. But once school finished and they're no longer playing sport, there was a bit of an identity crisis there, because they were like, what do I do now? For my whole life, my identity as a male, my masculinity has been derived purely from being a physically dominant person who is a sports star. Now, where do
Become
I
a
start?
photographer.
Well, it's funny because your male athletes have that dilemma as to what do I do next, whereas your female athletes generally use families and childbirth as their pause to step out of sport. So their purpose shifts straight away.
Yeah.
Whereas psychologically, what you'll find with some athletes, and there's enough research done on this, most of them will turn to gambling and other level of dopamine and endorphin related activities.
And you can only have so many overweight commentators.
Yeah, that are actually of any quality.
Actually, Trav, what did you sort of put after pole vault and the sort of sports side of things? What did you dive into to kind of get that high?
I remember having conversation. I'll go back a little bit further. I remember having conversation with when I was looking to stop pole vault with my mum, actually, and she said the one thing that you'll need to grasp is that you'll no longer be Travis the pole vaulter. So you're going to have to create a new identity for yourself, basically. And that's one thing that I found the hardest thing to step away from. So I went into basketball and went into photography, and it took me a long time to grapple with choosing to stop, choosing to quit, I guess in the terms, choosing to stop doing that sport. And I'm fine with it now. I'm absolutely fine with it now, because if I didn't, it wouldn't have allowed me to do all the great things that I have done. So I see that as a pathway. But at the time, very difficult thing, because I was no longer Travis the pole vaulter. I was no longer special to people. I did an insane sport. People like, what the hell? How did you get into that? It was such a unique thing that I thrived on that too. So
You became Travis,
the jester.
nature lover.
And the tree hugger.
The tree hugger. That's something that age cannot take away from you.
It's got a good ring to it.
It does, actually.
It's like really.
It's just a much bigger pull.
It's really natural.
He didn't go
That's
straight into tree
natural.
hugging though.
It's really
They're not
natural.
all that wide. They don't all have the same girth.
He didn't always look like this hippie. I've got some early footage I'll share with you guys later.
Nice.
Thanks, guys. That's it for this episode for today. If you've enjoyed these topics, if you have any thoughts on the place of physicality and masculinity today, if you have any thoughts on male or females being the tougher sex and you're brave enough to put your comments forward.
I'm saying female straight up.
Or if you have experienced being an athlete or being a soldier or anything like this, and now you're, I guess, struggling with the identity and how to reconcile that, comment, share your thoughts, and kind of get in touch with us. If you're listening on iTunes, be sure to leave a review on the show. Let us know what you think. We're also on Spotify and YouTube in case you want to leave a comment. We appreciate any support you guys have got for the show. So thank you.
Goodbye.
Ciao.
Bye-bye.